She fainted at the rancher's door after 4 days no food, until he lifted her and said, "You're home now." The wind rolled across the Wyoming plain like a living thing, carrying dust, grit, and the bitter taste of winter, even though the sun still clung to the horizon. Clara had been walking for so long that the world had narrowed to a single thought. One more step. Then another. She could no longer remember when she had last eaten. Only the ache in her bones and the faint ringing in her ears that told her she was not far from collapse. Her boots were torn, her dress shredded at the hem, and the satchel she had once carried was long gone, torn from her hands in the scramble to escape. Her lips were cracked, bleeding at the edges, and her breath came in short, painful rasps. Still, she pushed forward, driven by a fading hope that somewhere ahead there might be shelter, someone kind enough to spare a cup of water, a scrap of bread, a moment of mercy. The ranch house stood alone, a single cabin against miles of rolling emptiness, its roof patched with tin, and its porch leaning slightly as though tired of holding itself upright. Smoke curled from the chimney, thin but steady, promising warmth, promising shelter, perhaps even a chance to breathe without fear for the first time in days. Clara blinked hard, trying to force her blurring vision to sharpen. Each time she lifted her foot, pain shot up her leg, but she bit it back and pressed forward. For days, that was how long she had wandered the wilderness, stumbling through gulches and along dry creek beds, hiding beneath thorn bushes when she heard distant hoofbeats. For days since she had last tasted food. For days since she had seen her brother's body fall to ground and known she had only moments before the same men turned on her. She had run until her lungs burned, slept only in fits, and prayed that the darkness would hide her tracks. But no matter how far she went, fear stayed close, stalking her through the night. Her knees buckled once, twice, and she caught herself on sheer instinct. She could not afford to fall now. The house was close, so close she could almost touch it. She forced her body to move, gripping her own arms for balance. She reached the bottom of the porch steps. Something inside her gave way. Her hand missed the railing. The world tilted. She collapsed face first into the wood, and everything went black. Inside the house, Elias Ward was stirring a pot of coffee over the fire when the dull thump echoed through the quiet. He paused, his brows cutting into a frown. Nothing ever approached his ranch. Not people, not animals, not anything except the wind. He set the kettle aside, reached for the rifle leaning near the door, and stepped outside. At first he saw nothing but the empty yard. Then his gaze dropped and he froze. A woman lay crumpled against the steps, frail as a dead fawn. Her hair was matted with dust, her skin pale beneath streaks of sweat and grime. Elias crouched, one hand gripping his rifle, the other reaching out cautiously. He touched her shoulder. She did not stir. "Ma'am," he said quietly, unsure whether she could hear. "Can you open your eyes?" No response. Her breathing was shallow, each breath rattling like dry leaves. He eased his arms beneath her, surprised by how light she felt, as though hunger had hollowed her out until she weighed almost nothing. When he lifted her, her head lolled against his chest. Despite himself, something tightened in his throat. "You're safe now," he murmured, though he did not know why the words came. "You're home." He carried her inside and laid her on the narrow cot near the fireplace. The cabin was simple. One room, a small loft overhead, shelves lined with tools and canning jars, a single table with mismatched chairs. It had been enough for him, a man who had long stopped expecting company. But now, seeing the stranger lying unconscious under his roof, the place suddenly felt too quiet, too empty, as though it had been waiting for something to disturb its stillness. Elias warmed water, poured a small measure into a cup, and dabbed it onto her cracked lips with a cloth. She stirred faintly, but her eyes remained closed. He studied her face. She could not have been much older than 20. Hard living had worn her down, but beneath the exhaustion, he saw features that might have once held softness. Whatever had driven her to this desolate place had been enough to strip her of everything except the will to keep walking. Hours passed. The light faded. Elias kept to his chair near the fire, glancing at her every few moments. Near sundown, she shifted, her fingers twitching as though grasping for something in a dream. Then her eyelids fluttered open. Her gaze darted around the room, wide and frightened, until it landed on him. She jerked upright, or tried to. Her strength failed, and her arms shook beneath her. "Easy," he said, rising and stepping back, so she could see he carried no threat. "You're safe here. You fainted on my porch." She swallowed hard, her throat working painfully. Where am I?" "My ranch," he answered, "just south of Willow Creek. Name's Elias Ward." She stared at him as though trying to decide whether she should run, fight, or surrender. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to trespass." "You weren't trespassing," Elias said. "You needed help." For a long moment she said nothing. Her gaze shifted to her hands, limp in her lap. The firelight flickered against her face, revealing the shadows beneath her eyes and the trembling of her lips. When she finally looked up, the fear had not vanished, but was tempered by something else. Weariness, bone deep and unrelenting. "What day is it?" she asked. "Wednesday." She nodded slowly, as though calculating how much time she had lost. When she spoke again, her voice cracked. "I haven't eaten since Saturday." Elias's jaw tightened. He moved to the stove and ladled a small portion of broth into a cup. "Sip this," he said, handing it to her. Slowly. She obeyed, though her hand shook so violently he had to steady the cup. After a few sips, she leaned back, breath unsteady, but some of the tightness in her face eased. "Thank you," she whispered. "I would have died out there." "Maybe," Elias replied, "but you didn't." Her eyes fell to the floor again. He sensed she was hiding something, a truth she was weighing, deciding whether sharing it would save her or damn her. He did not push. He had learned long ago that folks only spoke when they were ready. Outside, the distant sound of hoofbeats cracked the stillness. Elias stiffened. Clara's head snapped toward the window, terror flashing across her face like lightning. "No," she breathed. "They found me." Elias moved to the door and peered outside. 3 riders moved along the ridge, silhouettes against the dying sun. They were too far to make out clearly, but he recognized the posture, the deliberate, searching way they scanned the land. "Who are they?" he asked, though he sensed he already knew the answer. She pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting for steady breath. "I don't know their names, but they ride for a man called Harlan Pike." The name sat heavy in the air. Elias had heard it before, whispers in town. Stories of land taken by force, of families driven out, of bodies found in shallow graves. "What does Pike want with you?" Elias asked. Clara hesitated, then closed her eyes as though bracing against the memory. "My brother and I live near the old trading post," she said. "Pike's men came, said we owed him for using his land. My brother refused. They shot him. I ran." Elias clenched his jaw. He looked again at the ridge. The riders had paused, surveying the plain, searching, hunting. "You're safe inside," he said. "They won't see you." Her eyes glistened, though she fought the tears. "They don't stop," she said. "They follow until they get what he wants." Elias shut the door, bolting it. "Let them try," he muttered. Clara watched him, something shifting in her gaze. "Why are you helping me?" He paused. The fire popped behind him. "Because someone should have helped my family," he said finally, "and no one did." Silence fell. Clara's expression softened, not with pity but with understanding. She drew the blanket tighter around her shoulders and leaned back against the cot. Night settled over the plains. The wind howled softly against the cabin walls, but inside the fire cast a warm glow, pushing back the darkness. Clara drifted into sleep, exhaustion claiming her once more. Elias remained seated, rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the door. He had lived alone for years, content to let the world pass by without asking anything of him. But the moment he found her collapsed on his porch, something had shifted. The world outside was dangerous, merciless, and hungry for the vulnerable. And for reasons he was not yet ready to name, he had decided she would not face it alone. As the fire dimmed to embers, Elias rose and added another log, knowing sleep would not visit him tonight. Outside, the riders had vanished into the darkness, but their presence lingered like a storm waiting beyond the horizon. Clara murmured in her sleep, flinching at ghosts he could not see. Elias stood over her, the weight of a silent promise settling over him. Whatever hunted her would have to pass through him now. He returned to his chair, the floorboards creaking beneath his boots, and settled in once more, determined to outlast the night and whatever waited beyond dawn. The first light of dawn crept across the plains, pale and cold, slipping through the narrow cracks in the cabin walls and brushing Clara's face with a faint golden glow. She stirred but did not wake. Her breathing was steady, the first peaceful breath she had taken in days. Elias rose from his chair, stiff from a night of watching the door, and stretched the ache from his shoulders before stepping outside. Frost clung to the edges of the grass. The sky was an unbroken sheet of fading stars. The ridge where the riders had appeared stood empty now, but their presence lingered like smoke after a fire. He scanned the horizon twice, then a third time, before finally lowering his rifle and allowing his shoulders to relax. For now, at least, they were alone. When he stepped back inside, Clara had woken and was sitting up, her hands wrapped in the blanket. Her eyes met his, wary but clearer than the night before. Did they come back? No, Elias answered, setting the rifle aside. Not yet. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. They will. Maybe, he said, pouring water into a tin cup and handing it to her. But they'll have a harder time finding you if you stay inside and rest. She took the cup, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted it. I don't know how to repay you for this. Don't fret about that, he replied. You do the same for someone else. Her gaze drifted to the window again. She didn't answer. He could see the wariness still clinging to her, but he also saw something else begin to take shape. Resolve, fragile but growing. While she finished her drink, Elias moved quietly through the cabin, tending to chores he had done alone for years. The familiarity of the routine steadied him. He chopped wood, fed the horses, checked the fences. But every few minutes, he glanced toward the cabin, uneasy at leaving her alone too long. When he returned, he found Clara standing unsteadily near the table, clutching the edge for support. You should stay lying down, he said. I need to walk, she insisted. My legs feel like they'll forget. How if I don't? He stepped closer, noticing the strain etched on her face. You'll get your strength back. Takes time. Time is the one thing I don't have, she murmured. Elias paused. You're safe here. For how long? She whispered. He didn't answer, because he didn't know. Clara lowered herself into a chair, staring at her hands. I didn't think I'd see another sunrise, she said quietly. I thought I'd die out there. Most folks would have, Elias replied, but you kept going. She gave a brittle smile. Maybe running scared makes you stubborn. He almost smiled back, but before he could, a faint rustle outside caught his ear. He stiffened, hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. Clara froze. The sound came again, low, deliberate, like brush shifting beneath something heavy. Elias gestured for her to stay quiet and stepped outside. He saw them immediately. Wolves, 3 of them, circling the side of the cabin, lean and hungry from the long winter. Their eyes gleamed with predatory focus. One growled low, hackles raised. Clara appeared at the doorway despite his warning, gripping the frame for balance. Get back inside, Elias said sharply, but she didn't move. Her gaze locked on the animals with wide, fearful eyes. One of the wolves lunged forward, teeth bared. Elias swung the rifle up, fired once, and the shot echoed across the empty land. The lead wolf dropped, the others scattering in wild confusion before disappearing into the brush. Clara flinched at the sound, stumbling back as though struck. Elias lowered the rifle and turned toward her. You all right? She nodded shakily. I thought they were men. No, Elias said softly. Just wolves hungry enough to test their luck. Feels like everything out here wants to kill me, she whispered. It's the frontier, he replied. Everything's always trying to kill someone. He led her back inside, helped her to the cot, and stoked the fire. She watched him with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something she hadn't yet found words for. As the morning wore on, color returned to her cheeks. She ate slowly, small portions Elias prepared with quiet care. After the meal, she sat near the fire, pulling the blanket tighter. Elias sensed the moment was right, so he sat across from her and spoke in a calm, steady voice. You ran from Pike. I know pieces of it. But if I'm to help you, I need to know the whole of it. She stiffened. Why? Because those men aren't riding for no reason. If they're hunting you, then you're in danger, and anyone near you is too. Clara's breath trembled. She looked away, staring into the fire as though the flames could gather her courage. Finally, she spoke. I worked at the trading post near Red Bluff, she said. My brother Samuel, and I took it over after our parents died. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Folks came through for supplies, news, a game of cards in the back room. It kept us fed. She paused, swallowing hard. Then Pike's men started showing up. First it was small things. They wanted credit on supplies. Then they wanted more credit. Then they said the land beneath the trading post belonged to Pike, even though we had papers proving otherwise. Samuel refused to pay them. He said a man shouldn't have to bow to a bully. Her voice thickened with emotion. One night they came back. They said we owed $30 a month. $30 we didn't have. Samuel told them to get off our land. A tear slid down her cheek. They shot him. Right there. In front of me. Elias's brows tightened, his jaw clenching. They turned me next, Clara whispered. Said Pike wanted me brought back to him. Said he had plans for me. Her voice shook with disgust. I ran. I don't know how they didn't catch me. Maybe Samuel bought me those few seconds with his life. Silence draped the cabin, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Elias finally said, I'm sorry about your brother. Clara wiped her cheek. He was all I had left. You're not alone now, Elias said quietly. She looked at him, searching his face. For a moment her fear eased, replaced by something like trust. That moment ended abruptly. Hoofbeats again, closer this time, heavy and unmistakable. Clara's face drained of color. Elias grabbed his rifle and motioned for her to follow. He led her to a trapdoor beneath the table. Pulling it open. Get in, he said. Clara hesitated. What about you? I'll handle them. She shook her head. They'll kill you. He met her gaze. Not before they regret trying. Clara swallowed and climbed down into the small cellar, crouching among the barrels. Elias lowered the trapdoor just as the hoofbeats stopped outside. A fist slammed against the door. Ward, a rough voice barked. We know you're in there. Elias set his jaw and opened the door. 3 men sat on their horses, each armed, each wearing the hard, smug look of men who believed the land belonged to them. The leader, a man with a scar down his cheek, tilted his head. We're looking for a girl, he said. Passed through here yesterday. Elias leaned against the doorframe with deliberate calm. Haven't seen a soul in weeks. Funny, the scarred man said, smirking. Tracks lead this way. Then the wind must have fooled you. The man's expression hardened. Pike don't like being lied to. Then Pike shouldn't send men who don't know truth when they hear it. A tense silence followed. Elias rested his hand casually against the rifle by his leg, though not so casually that the riders didn't see it. The scarred man clicked his tongue, studying Elias with narrowed eyes. You're a stubborn one, he said. That's been said. The leader leaned forward. We'll be back, and next time we won't be asking. Elias didn't move until the riders finally turned and galloped off. Only when they were specks on the horizon did he let out a slow breath and close the door. He lifted the trapdoor. Clara climbed out, shaking from fear and outrage. You could have been killed. I've been shot at before, he said. Men like them don't scare easy, but they scare off for a while. Clara pressed a hand to her heart, trying to steady her breath. This is my fault. They wouldn't be here if not for me. Elias shook his head. Their choices are theirs, not yours. She sank into the chair, tears threatening. I should go. I shouldn't put you in danger. You can't walk a mile in your condition, he said. I'll crawl if I have to. Elias knelt in front of her. Clara, you leave now. They'll catch you before sundown. Then what choice do I have? She whispered. You stay, he said. She looked at him, desperate and torn. "But you just said—" "I said they'll be back," he interrupted. "Not that you're leaving." Confusion and relief warred in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" Elias hesitated. His voice softened. "Because I know what it feels like to lose everything. My wife and daughter drowned 2 winters ago, crossing the Bighorn River. Ice cracked beneath the wagon. I couldn't reach them. Couldn't save them. After that, I shut myself away. Figured the world had done enough damage to me, and I'd return the favor by keeping my distance." Clara's eyes brimmed with sympathy. "But when I found you on my porch," he continued, "I knew I couldn't turn my back again. Not on someone who still had a chance." Clara wiped her eyes. "Elias, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied quietly. "Just stay alive." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Then I'll stay." Elias rose and stoked the fire again. Clara watched him with new understanding, her fears shifting into something steadier, something that felt almost like hope. Outside, the plains lay quiet under the open sky, but the threat was still out there waiting. Clara knew it. Elias knew it. But for the first time since she had fled into the wilderness, she did not face that threat alone. The wind crawled across the empty plains like a wounded creature, dragging dust and whispers over the desolate stretch of earth where the sky sagged low and heavy. By dusk, the land carried a stillness so absolute that even the dying light seemed to hesitate, as if waiting for something, some reckoning, some truth long buried beneath the soil. And she stood right there in the heart of it, her breath thin and shaking, her hands trembling around the frayed handle of the revolver she never imagined herself lifting. She had not touched a gun before this week. She had not imagined she would point one at the man who had nearly claimed her life. Yet here she was, spine rigid, face cut by dusk shadows, eyes locked on a silhouette slowly dismounting from a roan gelding. He walked with that familiar swagger, a cruel twist of confidence, boots clicking softly through grit, every step carrying the weight of old violence. Crow Montgomery, the man whose threats had chased her through storm and starvation, whose greed had poisoned towns, whose name mothers whispered to frighten restless children. He was the ghost she thought she had outrun. But ghosts always knew the shortest path back. "So," Crow drawled, dusting his coat sleeve, "you really made home out here. Didn't think you had it in you." She swallowed hard. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she refused to flinch. "I didn't invite you. You didn't need to." His pale eyes gleamed with amusement. "You've been running on borrowed time. Thought I'd come collect." Behind her, the cabin door groaned open. The rancher stepped out silently, tall, broad-shouldered, carrying nothing but a quiet steel in his eyes. He didn't raise a weapon. He didn't need to. His presence alone steadied her breathing. The warmth he'd given her, food, shelter, safety, burned like a shield around her spine. Still, she knew he couldn't fight this battle for her, not entirely. Some demons demanded the voice of the person who survived them. Crow's grin widened when he saw the rancher. "Ah, the Good Samaritan. Heard about you. Folks say you taking strays. Feed 'em, fix 'em. Real noble." The rancher didn't blink. "She's under my protection." Crow clicked his tongue. Protection's just a fancy word for delay. The sky thickened to a deep bruised purple. She felt the cold settle over her shoulders. She knew what Crow wanted, what he always wanted. Control, punishment, a reminder that people like her were meant to kneel. But she wasn't the same starving, desperate woman who collapsed at a stranger's door 4 days from death. Something had shifted these past weeks. She had healed. She had learned to speak her name without trembling. She had learned to eat without apology. She had learned she mattered. Crow couldn't take that from her. She lifted her chin. "You're leaving? Now?" Crow's laughter echoed across the plain. "Sweetheart, I taught you better than to bluff." The rancher stepped forward, voice low and calm. "Crow, nobody wants blood tonight. Walk away. Blood is exactly why I'm here." Crow's hand snapped toward his holster. She fired first. The shot cracked through the world like lightning splitting a tree in half. The recoil jolted her shoulder, but she held firm. Crow staggered back, not hit, but stunned. She had fired deliberately into the dirt at his boots, spraying dust across his coat. Her voice didn't shake. Next one lands. Crow's stare flickered. First disbelief, then fury, then something far sharper. Calculation. You're serious. I'm done running. Silence wrapped around them, thick and humming. Even the wind paused. Crow's lip curled. Then let's finish this. He lunged. Before she even realized she had moved, the rancher was between them, not blocking her, but fighting beside her. Crow swung hard. The rancher caught the blow, twisting Crow's wrist until bone strained. The gun clattered to the dirt. Crow snarled and drove an elbow into the rancher's ribs, but the rancher barely staggered. Years of cattle work and long miles had carved strength into him nothing could unmake. She didn't rush. She held the gun steady, her breath sharp and controlled. Every instinct screamed for flight, but she forced herself to stand her ground. She watched their grappling forms, Crow wild and thrashing, the rancher steady and fierce, his jaw set in a grim line. They crashed against the water trough, sending it rocking. Crow grabbed a fistful of dirt and flung it into the rancher's eyes. For a heartbeat, the rancher faltered. Just enough. Crow swung a knife from his boot. Her pulse knifed through her. She aimed. No! The rancher barked, censored her shot, even blinded. Crow lunged, blade arcing toward the rancher's throat. She sprinted forward, slamming her shoulder into Crow's back. The knife slashed past the rancher, missing by an inch. Crow wheeled on her, grabbing her arm, twisting. Pain shot fire up her elbow. She dropped the gun. Crow's breath hissed hot through his teeth. Look at you, pretending you're brave. She met his eyes. I'm not pretending. She head-butted him. Hard. Crow reeled backward, cursing, hand pressed to his bleeding lip. The rancher recovered, wiping grit from his lashes, sight clearing. With a rough growl, he seized Crow from behind, pinning his arms. She scrambled for the gun. Her fingers brushed the handle. Then Crow kicked it out of reach. It skidded into the darkness beneath the porch. Crow strained violently, nearly breaking free. The rancher tightened his hold, but Crow twisted, slamming his boot into the rancher's knee. The rancher dropped to one leg with a pained grunt. Crow wrenched himself loose and bolted for the horse. She knew if he reached it, he'd circle back with men, guns, fire. This wasn't just a fight. It was a final tether to a past she needed to sever or be consumed by forever. She ran. Her legs burned, lungs clawing for breath, boots pounding the earth. Crow scrambled onto the saddle, kicking the horse's flank. The gelding reared, snorted, surged forward. She leapt. Her hands grabbed the saddle horn as she slammed into Crow's side. The horse bucked wildly. Crow shouted, elbowing her, trying to shake her loose. But desperation had carved new strength into her bones. She clung to him, fingers digging into his coat, pulling him backward. They toppled. The horse tore away, hooves thunder drumming across the plain. Crow, and she crashed into the dirt, rolling. Crow recovered quicker. He shoved her down, pinning her with his forearm across her throat. You never knew your place, he snarled. Let me remind you. Spots danced across her vision. Her lungs screamed. Then Crow jerked, his body wrenching sideways, ripped off her by the rancher's brutal tackle. The two men hit the ground in a tangle of fists and fury. The rancher's punches landed with the force of a hammer, each one a release of all the fear he'd swallowed since the night he'd found her starving on his porch. Crow tried to reach his knife again, but she kicked it away, far into the grass. Crow shoved the rancher off with a desperate heave and staggered to his feet. He saw the distant horse. Escape. Revenge later. He ran. She didn't hesitate. She reached the rancher's rifle leaning by the fence post, a weapon heavy as truth, and lifted it to her shoulder. Her breathing steadied. Her arms stopped trembling. Time shrank into a single thin line of intention. Crow mounted, boots scraping leather, hands clutching reins. She fired. Crow screamed as the bullet tore through his shoulder. He collapsed over the horse's neck, sliding off into the dust. The gelding fled into the distance, leaving Crow writhing on the ground, clutching the wound. The rancher limped to her side, breath ragged. chest heaving. You all right? She didn't answer immediately. She walked toward Crow slowly, each step measured. Crow's face twisted in pain and disbelief. You shot me. You earned it. Crow spat blood, voice raw. Finish it then. Do it. She aimed at him, and for a long moment the world held its breath. His eyes narrowed, daring her, demanding she prove she was as brutal as he had always claimed. But she lowered the rifle. I'm not you. Crow's laugh cracked like broken glass. Mercy will kill you. No, she said softly. It frees me. The rancher stepped forward, rope in hand, and tied Crow's wrists with firm, unshakable knots. Law'll deal with you. Crow sneered, but his strength was fading. He glared up at her. This ain't the end. It is for me, she replied. They dragged him to the wagon and secured him. Then the rancher sent a rider to fetch the sheriff. Crow Montgomery, terror of 3 counties, would finally face justice. When the lawmen left with him, silence returned to Plains, but a different silence than before, lighter, open, waiting. The rancher turned to her, a bruise darkening along his jaw. You fought like hell. She exhaled shakily. I thought I'd break. You didn't. His gaze softened, warm as a lantern light, slipping to the cabin window. You chose to stand. She looked out across the empty horizon. So much of her life had been spent fleeing. Towns, men, hunger, fear. Tonight, she had stopped running. Tonight, she had ended something. Her voice trembled, but not from fear. I don't know what comes next. Then we figured out, he said. On your terms. She met his eyes. The world wasn't safe. But in his gaze, she found something steadier than safety, freedom. The first stars blinked awake overhead. She realized she wasn't shaking anymore. Let's go home, she whispered. He nodded and walked beside her, close enough for her to feel his warmth through the cooling night, far enough for her to know the choice to move forward belonged to her alone. For the first time in her life, she stepped into that choice willingly, and the plains, wide as eternity, opened their arms to receive her.